So, let's get right into it. On what seemed like a totally normal Friday morning, a mother of two took her dog for a walk along a path she knew like the back of her hand. But then, within just a few minutes, she vanished. All that was left was her phone, her dog, and a mystery that would absolutely explode into a national media firestorm. This is the story of how the search for Nicola Bulley became a spectacle and how the line between public interest and private grief got completely erased. These were the haunting words from Nicola's partner Paul Ansel right in those first few confusing days. That one sentence, it just perfectly captures the complete shock and agony the family was feeling. It was the feeling that pretty soon an entire nation would be sharing as they watched this whole thing unfold. All right, let's paint the picture here. The date is January 27th, 2023. We're in a quiet little village called St. Michael's on Wyre. Nicola Bulley, a 45-year-old mortgage advisor and a mom, was just going about her daily routine. She dropped her daughters at school and then took her dog, Willow, for a walk. From everything we know, she was happy, she was making plans for the weekend, just a normal day. What is so chilling about this is just how precise the timeline is. We've got digital footprints, we've got eyewitnesses, and it all creates this incredibly narrow window of time. At 9:10 a.m., she's seen. But by 9:33 a.m., just 23 minutes later, her phone and her dog are found all alone. Whatever happened to her, it happened fast, and it happened in that tiny, tiny slice of time. And the scene itself, it was just eerie. Imagine finding this, a cell phone sitting on a bench, still logged into a work meeting, her dog, Willow, wandering around looking really anxious, and then the dog's harness just sitting there on the ground. There was no sign of a struggle, no scuff marks, nothing. It was literally as if she had just vanished into thin air, leaving these few, deeply unsettling clues behind. So with no quick and easy answers, the whole situation pretty much split into two completely different stories almost immediately. You had the official police theory on one side, and on the other, you had the family's gut feelings and their doubts, which were echoed by a huge portion of the public. This tension is really what defined the entire search. The police, they really zeroed in on one single theory. They called it their main working hypothesis, that this was a tragic accident and that Nicola had fallen into the river. But for her family, and for a lot of people watching, that just didn't add up. Why? Well, she was a strong swimmer. Her dog was totally dry, and there was nothing on the riverbank to suggest she'd slipped. This gap between the official story and just plain gut instinct is absolutely crucial here. This quote right here, it just perfectly nails the turning point. Because the police were so focused on their one theory and they couldn't offer up any solid proof, this giant information vacuum opened up. And, as we all know, the internet cannot stand a vacuum. This is the exact moment the story went from being a tragic search for a missing person to an out-of-control media circus. And oh boy, did that storm rush in. The Nicola Bulley case became this social media phenomenon like nothing we'd ever really seen before. It stopped being just news coverage. It became content. It became a real-time mystery that this huge online audience felt they needed to solve. And it had some really devastating consequences. The scale of this whole digital frenzy was just staggering. You had these so-called TikTok detectives flooding the village, treating this sensitive area like it was some kind of tourist attraction. They were live streaming from the very bench where her phone was found. At the same time, completely baseless conspiracy theories were exploding online, targeting her partner and her family with the most disgusting accusations you can imagine. The real police investigation was getting drowned in noise, and her family, while living their absolute worst nightmare, was being tormented by this nonstop barrage of online hate. And then this happened. A truly catastrophic mistake. In what they said was an attempt to stop all the speculation, the Lancashire police released these incredibly private details about Nicola's health. They mentioned her struggles with alcohol and menopause. The backlash was, you can imagine, immediate and fierce. People saw it as a completely unnecessary and shocking breach of her privacy, and it just shattered whatever little public trust was left in the official investigation. So after weeks and weeks of chaos, of speculation, of all this noise, the search came to its tragic and somber end. The frantic energy of that media storm finally had to give way to the quiet, heartbreaking reality of the situation. 23 days. For 23 days, her family had to live with this crushing uncertainty, with false hope, with public judgment, and just unimaginable pain. 23 days. That's how long it took, from the moment she disappeared on her morning walk to the moment the search and all the speculation finally had an answer. And here's the factual conclusion. Her body was found in the river, about a mile from where she was last seen. And in a final, really bitter twist, she wasn't found by the massive police search teams or the specialist divers. She was found by two regular people who were just out for a walk. And as you can guess, that only raised more questions about the official search efforts. So the question wasn't where anymore, it was how. How could this have happened? Well, the inquest gave us a scientific answer that really cut through all the noise: cold water shock. The key thing to get here is what a sudden fall into water that cold actually does to your body. It can trigger this involuntary gasp. You breathe in water, and you can be incapacitated in seconds. It doesn't matter if you're a fantastic swimmer. So, the coroner's inquest was all about replacing rumors with hard facts. And what did it find? Her death was an accidental drowning. There was no foul play, no one else was involved, no evidence of any assault, and, importantly, no evidence she ever intended to harm herself. It turns out the police's initial theory, the one that got so much criticism, was actually correct. It was just a tragic, instantaneous accident. But, the story doesn't just end there. This case has left behind some really difficult questions. For the police, for the media, and frankly, for every single one of us who followed along online. This is the human cost. Her partner, Paul, he talked about being just bombarded with these horrific, hateful messages from complete strangers. He called social media a monster that literally silenced him and his family right when they needed their voices the most. Ultimately, the Nicola Bulley case really forces us to ask this critical question. In the huge rush to consume a real-life mystery, the lines between genuine concern, curiosity, and just creating content, they got dangerously blurred. And it leaves all of us to wonder, when a family's worst nightmare is turned into a global spectacle, are we actually helping? Or are we just making a terrible tragedy even worse?